right, welcome to this edition of Revitalize and Replant. Mark, if only the people could see what happens before the record button is hit the fifth or sixth time. And all the challenges that we had with Squadcast today. And folks, I'm not blaming Squadcast at all. I'm just saying it was a weird time to try to get us going. So after about 15 minutes of experimentation with Thom, Mark, and Amy, we are here. And this is Revitalize and Replant. Welcome to all of you who are listening to the podcast, and welcome to all of you who are joining us on the YouTube channel, getting some comments on social media from you about us. You're saying that Mark looks old and I look older, so thank you for that. It's great to be visual now. Mark, it's been a few weeks since we've gotten together, so welcome back.
Well, thank you, man. It's good to be back. Good to see you again. Your lovely face and
my lovely face.
That's right.
Well, we're going to be talking about some reasons you should consider pastoring a revitalizing church in retirement. Mark, you made a comment about something about the 60s, and I don't think you're talking about 60s music.
No, although 60s music is actually becoming my favorite music now. Frankly.
There you go. You are regenerate.
We are. My wife and I are building a house out by the church where we're replanting, and she told me I could redo one room, and so I could have one room. So I'm doing one room, sort of a man cave room. I'm doing it all in 1960s stuff, all real mid-century. Oh. It's real funky. It's gonna be really cool.
Any particular bands of the 60s going to be represented in that?
I like the Dave Clark Five. I really like Clark Five.
Over and over and over again.
And I love Petula Clark.
Downtown.
That's right. You can always go downtown.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Don't sleep in the subway, darling.
Smokey Robinson.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of them.
That's a lot of them. So anyway, the 60s, right?
Yes.
So when I first started working again for the North American Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention 5 or 7 years ago, I started out by sort of traveling around with Johnny Hunt and speaking with him. And Johnny said something and really believed it, and it really sort of impacted my life. I think if you live your life in a certain way, the most productive decades of your life can be your 60s and 70s. And I think sometimes we downplay that. And sometimes guys in their 60s and 70s just want to kind of keep doing what they did in their 30s and 40s, and that doesn't necessarily always work. Whenever you hear somebody gets up and say, I'm not retired, if they got to yell they're not retired, then they probably are retired. You can probably tell if somebody's not retired. I'm just saying, these guys, I'm not retired. But really, if you take all of your experiences in life and you maybe financially you're a little more secure. You don't have you're not raising children, all those kinds of things. I don't know about your marriage, but my marriage, we've been together a long time, and so we sort of figured each other out right now, and it's just a great time in marriage. And
I'm working on it.
A lot of things you can do in your 60s and 70s because we still have vitality and health and everything. And be honest, the presidents, the last three presidents have been in their 70s, for goodness sakes. And so,
yes, they have.
Well, it's true. And most of Congress is in their 80s. But it is.
And then you got the Supreme Court.
Yeah, they got the Supreme Court. But no, I want to be serious about that. I think guys need to look at their 60s and 70s as an optimal time for ministry. And if you've got any kind of retirement plan or whatever, you really have some options you wouldn't have had when you were 28 and had 3 kids at home.
Right.
All right.
So
by the way, I don't think my 62-year-old self would have liked my 32-year-old self. I think I've matured and softened, and I remember what I was like in my early 30s. And it's like I don't think I hopefully I'm a little softer around the edges, a little more graceful than I was back then.
Well, someone from my graduating class, and I think my graduating class had 36 people in it, so it was a big high school. Someone from my graduating class sent a picture of our entire class. If I remember right, maybe 33 or 34 of them were in there, and the others were cropped out for some reason. I have no idea because I couldn't find my then best friend on there. And if I'm 66 years old, if I'm looking at my teenage self, I don't like that. But then if I look at my 20 self, I don't like that. Maybe 30s, nah. 40s, nah. 50s, nah. So I hope 60s will be good because the reviews don't go very well on that. Hey, just a reminder, Revitalize and Replant is sponsored by the North American Mission Board and churchreplanters.com. That's a place where you need to go, folks, churchreplanters.com. You can also go to nambnamnet.net, and you can get a lot of great information there. But we're going to talk about this whole issue of if you're in again, retirement mode may be changing vocation mode. That
Right.
might be a better way. Maybe revitalizing a church is something that you can do. And here's the deal, Mark. On January the 1st, 2011,
Yeah.
the first boomer turned 65. January 1st, 2011. On that day, 10,000 boomers turned 65. And every day since then, 10,000 boomers have turned 65 years old. So there are a lot of people in this area, a lot of people that will be coming into this area, and they could be really blessed and be a blessing in some of these churches that need revitalization. So we're going to go over 5 of these, and you're going to probably give us a bonus at the end as well, Mark. So
Probably.
number 1 is your experience is invaluable.
I know how you can read books, you can go to conferences, you can listen to podcasts, but nothing takes the place of 40 years of dealing with people, 40 years of hearing it all, 40 years of making mistakes. When I say I don't think I like my 32-year-old self, I made so many mistakes, and by the grace of God, I've learned from those mistakes. And so
Right.
some of the stupid things I did in my 30s, I don't do anymore for the most part because I've learned from those. So after 40 years in ministry, you bring all of this experience that you have, and hopefully in that time, God has edified you. It's been a painful process in many ways. You can look back at your life and look at all the mistakes you made and all the challenges God put you through and all the experiences you had. And some of them were really painful, but God was edifying you. He's making you more like Christ. And so hopefully by the time you get to be 60, 65, you're a little more edified than you were when you were 20 or 25, hopefully.
Now,
And,
I think you've heard this, Mark. Have you heard Nellie Joe's response when I told her I wanted to write a book on mistakes I've made in ministry?
no, I have not heard that. No.
She said it would need to be a multi-volume series. And she's exactly right.
That's
She's
probably true. But
yes.
that's where we learn, right? I mean, we learn from our mistakes if we're smart. I mean, if we have any emotional intelligence at all, we learn from our mistakes. If you don't have emotional intelligence and you don't learn from your mistakes, then for goodness sakes, don't go pastor a revitalizing church.
You will get killed if you happen to do that. You will get killed. Second reason, presuming that full-time pay is no longer a requisite for these persons in their retirement phase, you could work. And when I say part-time, I mean part-time pay. I don't know if there's any such thing as part-time ministry, but you could work part-time since many revitalizing churches can't afford it. Think of all the doors that opens up if you're willing to take a smaller paycheck.
It really does. And I know some pastors haven't planned really, they just didn't have the money to really put away for retirement. It may be a minimal retirement that they have plus Social Security. I realize that. But you're not raising children anymore. You're not putting them through college for the most part by the time you get to that age. And so your living expenses are less. I know in our life, even you get to be in your 60s and you just don't have to. Maybe some people do. But I think to some degree, we get to be our age. We're just pretty content with what we have. We understand that we don't have to have the biggest TV and the newest car, and so the older we get, I think we can live on less, is what I'm saying. Even if you've not got a lot put away for retirement, you can perhaps live on less. You don't have your children at home, and you don't eat out probably as much, eat at home more or whatever.
Yeah.
So you have some more flexibility in terms of your income to serve churches that really could benefit from your experience and your leadership.
Hey, Mark, speaking of this issue of retirement and having adequate income, this is spontaneous, so bear with me if I do this. My son, Art Rayner, is providing a limited number of free 1-hour financial consultations to pastors to prepare them for whatever age they may be. So it's totally free. And some of the pastors he's telling me have come away and said, "Wow." Like a 50-year-old said, "I wish I'd heard this when I was 30," or 40-year-old
Yeah.
said, "Whatever." But even if they're in retirement age, he loves pastors so much, he's offering a limited number. So I know that this is your and Nam's podcast, but do you mind if I put that link in the show notes? Because it's totally free.
Absolutely, because really, the more guys that are prepared for retirement, that's a larger army we have of guys that can go out and help replant dying churches. I mean, the better they prepare ahead of time. Also, again, speaking just to the Southern Baptist audience here, Guidestone Financial Resources. I heard from one of their trustees last week. They have a program that you're probably aware of called Mission Dignity, so that
Right.
pastors who didn't put enough away in retirement, there are churches who give extra money, individuals who give extra money to help those pastors, and that program is very much in use. And if you're a pastor and you're retired and you just didn't put enough away, I want you to reach out to Guidestone if that's your Southern Baptist tribe, and talk about Mission Dignity, because they can help you as well. So we can have a whole other discussion about how, if you've not planned for retirement, there are still ways you can do ministry after retirement. But certainly, yes, to answer your question, you can go to a church that can't provide a full-time salary. You got Medicare and Medicaid. You might need a little bit of extra, but you've got Medicare there, once you reach 65, so you don't really need the full health coverage you need if you had a family of 5, that kind of thing.
Right.
So I think we're just speaking the obvious here, but there is a financial ability to go to a church that can't pay as much if you don't have a young family and you're just starting out.
For those of you who would be interested in grabbing one of those free 1 hours from Art, it's art@morethan.money. Art@morethan.money. The money is the domain. So art@morethan.money, and you can see that in the show notes. It's a great ministry he has. He's not charging for it, but he does have a limited number. So y'all run over there if you're interested in it as well. Here's another reason. You can go to these revitalizing churches and you're not signing a lifetime contract. You could say, "I'll be there to help you for a while." I'm not going to mention his name because I don't have permission to do so, but I have a dear friend who is probably late 60s would be my guess. And he has been going to Maine and working with churches there and giving them a limited amount of time, duration, I'm talking about a few months, but helping them to kickstart some things. It has been an amazing ministry. He's going there because he can afford it. He's going there because he doesn't need them to afford it. And just think what you could do in a revitalizing church if you say, "I'm going to commit to a year." I talked to another pastor who is looking at going to Long Island for a year. But you don't sign a lifetime contract, because when you get to be our age, the other side of the lifetime may not be that long.
Well, yeah, you're talking too about sort of intentional, transitional, interim kind of thing.
Yes, exactly.
And there's a huge need for intentional, transitional interims. And if I were approaching retirement and I'm a pastor, I would look at getting every bit of training I could in intentional, transitional interims. Because one of the greatest ministries you can have is to go to a church that's really struggling, been through a lot of problems, maybe at the point of closure, and you come in not to stay for 20 years, but you come in to take all of your experience, your patience, your gentleness, your pastoral skills, your love, you bring it to them, and you know what, for the next year or 2 or 3, my wife and I are going to be here, we're going to love you, we're going to help you redefine who you are and what Christ wants for this church, and this is our ministry. And then you go do another one. And I know some people, and you do too, Dr. Rayner, who actually have motorhomes, or they have RVs, and they just go from place to place and do that for a period of time. I think That's a wonderful opportunity. And there are all kinds of places that would be delighted to have you come and do that kind of thing.
Well, and again, this is a chance to see the country, maybe even see the world, but definitely see the country. I don't think my friend had ever been to Maine, and now it's his second state. He's a Mississippian. And he spends a lot of time in Maine. He does a great job.
Well, let me give you two really quick examples of that. One is a great friend of mine for years named Bill Jenkins. He used to work with me. He's considerably older than me. He's gone on to be with the Lord now. But I was in Canada in the early 2000s, and we had a church in Halifax in Nova Scotia that just needed a transitional interim. And Jenkins was in Franklin, Tennessee, believe it or not. That's where he lived.
That's where I live right now.
I know. So I took Bill, He was about 67, 68 years old. I took him to Halifax, Nova Scotia. We flew to Boston and took an all-night ferry and got to Halifax. And man, he pastored those people, loved those people. It was talk about a different environment from Franklin, Tennessee to Halifax, Nova Scotia. But it was a great environment. I was probably in my late 30s at the time, and Bill and I used to tease each other constantly, and he looked a lot older than he was. Anyway, right next door to the church was a new assisted living facility. So Jenkins said, "Man, we got to go in there and look that place over and talk to the leadership." And I go, "Yeah, it'd be great." So we walked in there, and she said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm here to see if you can get a room for my dad. He's beginning to get dementia." And Bill go, "Don't you say that, I'm the pastor next door." I go, "Yeah, he thinks he's the pastor next door." It wasn't very funny. It was actually funny, but anyway, that was good. Here's the second story. This is a really personal one. My dad pastored in Independence, Missouri for almost 30 years at Emmanuel. He turned 65, 66. He'd been there for almost 30 years, and he really believed they just needed the new leadership. The church was really going well and all of that, but he just felt like he wanted to leave really before he needed to leave, if that makes any sense. And there was a church in Topeka, Kansas, about 60, 75 miles west, that was really struggling. So he and my mom, they moved to Topeka, Kansas, got an apartment really right next door to the church. And for 4 or 5 years, my dad just brought that church back to life. And one of the cool things about it was, unbeknownst to anybody, Walmart was needing to buy, they were going to build a new building, a new Walmart store, and they had to have the ball diamond that church had. And so it ended up the church received, well, I don't know, $1 million or something. So my dad being there was able to navigate that and make sure that money was used well for missions and the future of the church, and with his maturity and all that stuff, and the church did well. So I got two personal experiences of guys who in their 60s went to different places and had some of their most fruitful ministry. I'm serious, some of their most fruitful ministry in their 60s in a difficult place. Again, you get to that point, you're not looking to go to a bigger church. You're not looking to sort of make a career move. You're just looking to do ministry where you're needed.
Exactly.
And that's a wonderful thing.
It's a thing of freedom is what it is.
Yeah.
You're not bound by so many things that you're bound by otherwise. Your dad died 3-4 years ago?
Yeah, he died about 3 years ago. Yeah.
I thought I remembered that. Yeah, what an influence and what a legacy that he continues to have through you. This is cliche, Mark, but your ministry is never over. I mean, as long as you have a breath to breathe and a step to walk, and even if you don't have a step to walk, there's something that you can continue to do. So this whole thing about I'm just going to go lay out on the beach or go to the golf course. Mm-hmm. You can enjoy those things, but my goodness, ministry is never over.
No, and again, if you'll allow me, when my father, he did a great job at the church in Topeka, and then he came back, and this was so cool. At that point, he said, "My job is to be the best church member I can be." So he went to the closest Southern Baptist church to his house, joined it, and became the best church member he could possibly be. And his pastor preached his pastor and I preached my dad's funeral. And his pastor said, "I've never had a church member as good as Brother Harry." He said, every now and then I would do something people wouldn't like, and they would go talk to Brother Harry, and he'd say, "Just love your pastor, trust your pastor, pray for your pastor." He said, "He did more for me than he'll ever know." And he did a lot of funerals, and he did a lot of weddings and stuff until he couldn't really do it anymore. I mean, there was a time when I would drive him to the funeral, walk him in there. I would read the obituary because he had macular degeneration, was basically couldn't read anymore hardly, and then he would preach the funeral. But at the end of his life, when he was in hospice, I would go over there, and my sisters and I had bought him a big, huge magnifying glass, and he would be sitting in that chair, nearly 90 years old, and he'd be reading the Bible, which he'd read his whole life. And we had a big phone there with great big numbers on it. And when he would just call people and pray for them, and I would tell him about some pastors who were struggling and some revitalizations, and he would call them and just pray for them over the phone. So until the very end of his life, he never retired from ministry, and his greatest joy was doing that. So I think, guys, if you find your joy in how many people you preach to, how big a platform you have, your retirement's going to be really hard for you. But if you find your joy in just loving people and serving Jesus, and you can do so much more in retirement years than you ever thought you could.
By the way, Mark, as a matter of coincidence, I said those same words to my son when I made the decision not to preach on Sundays or not to go anywhere on Sundays, that I'm not accepting Sunday invitations. I said, I want to go to my son's church and I want to be the best church member there is. And, I asked him recently, how am I doing there? He said, you're close. You're close. He said, but Doug and Amy, a couple you don't know, Doug and Amy, they're still the best ones. So, but you're close, Dad.
Good.
You had a bonus point.
Yeah, my bonus point really was your 60s and your 70s. Those years are some of your best, strongest years for ministry. And if you will be able to find ways to take everything you've learned, rather than seeing them as the time to wind down. Look, it's like if your life is a football game. In your 20s, you finish the first quarter. At halftime, you're in your 40s. In your 60s, you finish the third quarter. 80, fourth quarter, and after 80, you're in sudden death. Let's just be honest. So,
wait, Mark. No. Football is called overtime.
Overtime. Okay, that's right. You're in overtime. All right, you're in overtime.
You may have wanted to say sudden death because of the meeting there, the double entendre, but it is overtime. That's sudden death.
Here's the point. When the game is running down and the clock's running down, you can do a couple of things. You can take a knee and just wait and run out the clock, or you can say, you know what, I got to play the last 2 minutes of the game with a different intensity and a different strategy than maybe I played the first 2 minutes or even the first half. And there's an intensity and a specialness, because once you get to heaven, you're not going to be able to ever suffer or sacrifice for Christ again. You can only do that here on this earth. So I agree. You may want to go play golf. You may want to go camping and see the grandkids, but don't waste your retirement, because once you go to heaven, you can't go to that. You can't do anything that is sacrificial and costly like that for the kingdom. And Jesus said to know me in the power of my resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering. Paul said to know Jesus in the fellowship of his suffering. And so don't lose that in retirement, and realize that it's an opportunity, an amazing opportunity to serve Jesus in a way perhaps you've never served him before, and have some of your best years in ministry. And don't go around telling people, I'm not retired, I'm still doing ministry. That almost focuses it on you. I know some guys say that, and don't. I'm not trying to make fun of you. I'm just saying, don't be retired and just do ministry, and they'll see it. You don't have to advertise it. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. This has been a great podcast. I think there are a lot of retirees who will benefit from this, but there are a lot of people who are 10, 5, even 20 years away who will benefit from this. So thank you for being a part. Well, time out, Mark. Okay, time out.
One other extra. Just because you don't rule out a pastor in his 60s and 70s when you're looking for a pastor.
There you go.
Especially if you're a revitalization. Don't say we need a younger pastor. Not necessarily. Both Bill Jenkins, who went to Halifax, and my dad, who went to Topeka, they couldn't have been better fits. They reached young families. They did it, and they helped those older people reach young families. So don't just rule out older men thinking we just got to have a younger guy.
Well said. Well, thank you again for being at Revitalize and Replant. Thank you for being on this YouTube channel. Every now and then I want to look up so you can know that I'm not looking down at notes and show notes and all that. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being on the podcast if you're listening by audio. This has been Revitalize and Replant with Mark Clifton and Thom Rainer, and we'll continue to help churches revitalize and replant to greater health together.